Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of Jesus' resurrection. And we're going to enter the text of 1 Corinthians 15. We introduced it last time we were together. 1 Corinthians 15, as we said last time, it is a unit, and it's just a masterpiece of argumentation, of reasoning. And we get to see all of Paul's vast and varied education on display as he makes the case for not only Jesus' bodily resurrection, but our bodily resurrection. And as we mentioned last time, this was one of the first heresies coming from the Greek side of things that the church had to deal with. The denial that Jesus was raised in the flesh. Um, and so it has to be addressed. As we mentioned last time we were together, it's something that John talks about. John said that resurrection deniers, incarnation deniers, are antichrist. So Paul is so patiently and methodically is going to lay out the case. It is just a tour de force. Chapter 15 is as a defense of the most basic fact of Christian faith, which is the bodily resurrection of Jesus. So we're going to look at verses 1 through 7. And in verses 1 through 7, he communicates the fact of the resurrection, that it is an established fact that Jesus was raised in bodily form. So let's read chapter 15, verses 1 through 11. Now, I make known to you, brethren, the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, in which also you stand, by which you are also saved, if you hold fast the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 brethren at one time, most of whom remain until now, but some have fallen asleep. He also appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me. As it were one untimely born, he appeared to me also. For I am the least of the apostles, who am not fit to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace toward me did not prove vain. But I labored even more than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God with me. Whether then it was I or they, so we preached, and so you believed. So it's these 11 verses are a tight package. They're a circle that begin and end. I preached and you believed. I preached and you believed. And the basic fact of the gospel, and he shares the gospel almost word for word, what Jesus said to the men on the road to Emmaus, what Jesus opened their minds to in the scriptures in Luke's gospel, and exactly what Peter preached on the day of Pentecost. And Paul would have been in Jerusalem most likely, and he may have been there on that day. He may himself have heard the preaching on the day of Pentecost and rejected it, not accepted it. But the basic facts, the bodily incarnation of the Messiah from God, who is God's Son, who then offered himself as a physical sacrifice for our sins and was on the third day raised from the dead. That's the basic essential fact of the gospel. And this is what was preached, this is what was believed, this is what we stand upon, and it is the fact that saves us. If you take this fact away, you take away absolutely everything. A couple of other things in this passage I want us to notice. This is the earliest setting forward of the resurrection event and of the witnesses to the resurrection. First Corinthians is much earlier than the Gospels, in all likelihood, as best we know. And we notice a name that's missing, who is mentioned in all four Gospels as being the first person to see the risen Lord, and that's Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is not here. I don't know why. But we do have Cephas first. That's Peter. Um, the Aramaic version of Peter's name, Paphos. I don't, and Paul always refers to him not as Simon primarily, never, almost never, not as Peter, but as Cephas. It's always Cephas in Galatians 2. Cephas, or I mean Galatians 1, excuse me. It's Cephas. And he's always referring to Peter as Cephas, as the Aramaic version of the name Jesus gave him. I don't know why he does that, but he does. Um, and then he mentions this this event that is not recorded in the four Gospels, where he appeared at one time to 500 people, most of whom are still alive. And then we also have this singular individual appearance to James, James his brother, James the elder at Jerusalem, James who wrote the book of James. And then last of all, he appeared to me. When did this happen? Well, it didn't happen in Jerusalem. It happened in the Arabian desert, which the Apostle Paul talks about in Galatians, the first chapter, about how after his baptism and after he fled Damascus, he ends up in the Arabian desert for 3 years and is being trained personally by Jesus himself. He says, the second thing I want to notice is that something that he does frequently is that he remembers who he was in the past and says, I'm not worthy of any of this. And he means it. And he's not saying it because he doubts his grace. He says it because it reminds him of the greatness of God's grace. This is exactly what he will say to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 1, what he says to the Philippians in Philippians chapter 3. Um, he just rehearses his awful, violent past to celebrate the greatness of God's grace, and he does that here. And it is a reminder, not a subtle reminder, but a reminder in every way that if Jesus was not crucified in the flesh and was not raised in the flesh, none of it can be possible. None of it would have happened. So here we have the fact of the resurrection established by Old Testament scriptures, established by eyewitnesses. This is exactly what Peter preached on the day of Pentecost. And these eyewitnesses are not one, not two, but more than 500, and who have multiple appearances experienced by multiple people, some individuals, some groups, but it's established fact that resurrection was a bodily resurrection. Okay. We'll pick up with verse 12 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.